While those taking part in dawn services had to battle with the wet, the rain held out for Newcastle's Anzac March and service. Big crowds turned out for the day, lining Hunter Street 3 deep. It was an emotional parade led by local military historian David Dial, decked out in the Australian Light Horse uniform. Close to 2,000 people took part in this morning's march, including a large contingent of diggers, the Rats of Tobruk, Vietnam veterans and 40 visiting American servicemen. This year's parade also included many young cadets and community groups. Many walked proudly, boasting a clutch of medals. Once the ceremonies were over, the diggers headed back to local clubs for another Anzac tradition. And at Maitland, a large crowd gathered at the cenotaph to honour their Anzac heroes. The service in the city's park attracted a broad section of the community.
Well, the dawn service, we can honestly say it was the biggest it's ever been. Our President has mentioned that, and that's a fact. And I believe in Sydney it's also there, so we're going up, not down.
It just gives me an opportunity to show my gratitude to him, his servicemen and the country.
Large crowds also turned out here at Maitland for the march and service, despite the cool and overcast conditions. Meanwhile, commemoration services are also continuing on the Central Coast. The event is regarded as the best in the country. Over the next few days, riders will take part in dressage, cross-country and show jumping tests. Australia has won gold medals in the dressage section at both the Atlanta and Barcelona Olympics. The event has attracted nearly 100 riders, including some of the nation's leading competitors.
There's some very, very impressive up-and-coming young riders here. There's a great future for Australia.
Australia is the leading three-day event nation in the world, so the pressure will be on the riders this weekend to maintain a top standard. Several of the riders are using the competition as a lead-up to the World Championships in Ireland next year and the 2000 Games.
It's quite possible in this field here that we may have one or two or more that will form our team for the year 2000 and hopefully defend our title.
The event is also good preparation for the competition organisers as they gear up to host the world's best in 2000. Jenny Crouch, NBN News.
That anyone survived the accident is a minor miracle. Police say the female driver was attempting a U-turn at the end of the F3 freeway when she veered into the path of a brick-laden semi-trailer. The couple's Suzuki four-wheel drive caught fire on impact, the fire spreading to the cabin of the semi-trailer. A male passenger of the Suzuki owes his life to a passing motorist who pulled him from the burning car. The Sydney man was transferred to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital with multiple fractures, along with the truck driver who's in a stable condition. The dead woman was also from Sydney. Meanwhile, an 8-year-old girl has died after an accident late yesterday on the Lakes Way near Foster on the mid-north coast. Police say the girl's 40-year-old father was driving north at Green Point when the car crossed into the path of an oncoming sedan. The woman driver of the sedan was airlifted to John Hunter Hospital with leg and chest injuries. The young girl was also airlifted but died on arrival. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
After a loss to Lakes last weekend, Souths were planning to get back on track this afternoon at Townsend Oval. Both sides scored converted tries in the opening 10 minutes before the visitors hit the lead with their second touchdown. Backing up from Friday's Country First match, Steve Storey had no problems in adding the extras. Some were thinking South Ship was about to sink, and when Adrian McNabb was given 10 in the bin for a professional foul, their heads were almost underwater. West continued its charge, Storey again putting his mark on the game with a neat 360 and an offload to Tony Hutton. 10 points down, Southsea back before the break, but the early lead was enough for West to steal the 2 competition points.
A part of Newcastle died today. BHP's blueprint for the 21st century, severing the city's 80-year link to steelmaking.
Well, it's a sad day. I mean, they've reached into the hearts of the town and they've ripped them out.
Newcastle will be reduced to a steel mill and a wire mill. It's still planned to be phased out at a cost of 2,500 jobs.
A very, very difficult decision to make in regards to Newcastle. It's where we started to make steel in 1915. But we have to address the facts, we have to move forward.
Newcastle had finally fallen victim to falling world prices for steel, coupled with increased overseas competition and new high-tech manufacturing.
This is not viable. I mean, the reason it's not viable is that there's been a lack of commitment put in by the company to investment in refurbishment.
Today's purge, the final blow to a steelworks that's been slowly dying since the early 80s, when it employed more than 10,000 workers. They say it's like losing one of the family.
Steelworks at Newcastle's have been a standard thing. Everyone comes to work here and they retire here.
A bit disappointed. There's nothing I can really do though. It's just one of those things that's going to happen sooner or later.
Premier Bob Carr touched down in Newcastle just hours after the announcement for crisis talks with the union. He emerged with empathy, but not much hope. But sadness turned to cynicism as the Premier personally delivered his message to BHP's management.
And this is, of course, a boardroom betrayal of working class Australia.
No, I don't think it's boardroom betrayal. In my view, we are facing up to what needs to be done to have a viable business in Newcastle in the future.
The state government will work with BHP over the next 3 years to try and place as many of the workers in jobs as possible. The predictions of a mass walkout didn't eventuate. Workers will meet on Friday to decide what industrial action to take. Port Kembla and Whyalla escaped the full brunt of the cuts, but the union says BHP will phase out steel production in Australia altogether by 2020 in favour of East Asian markets. But by then, steelmaking in Newcastle will just be part of the city's past. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Every year is always different. Last year, for instance, there seemed to be a big emphasis on band music. For some unknown reason this year, it's gone back to chorals and solo items.
After last night's State Premier League loss to Illawarra, the Falcons regrouped today, previewing a tape of their next opposition, the Townsville Suns. Traditional easy beats, the Suns have been the NBL's big improvers in '97, with wins over Brisbane, Sydney and East Melbourne. The Falcons are coming off 2 losses. Coach Sean Dennis is predicting a game of attrition.
I expect a game that it really is going to be physical, and it's really going to be a game that's really, whoever wins deep down in the trenches, so to speak, will win this game.
It has all the makings of a grudge match. Former Falcons Derek Rucker and Grant Kruger returning, while for former Sun turned Falcon Tony Jensen, Sunday has special significance.
I guess I'm past the stage now where I've got vandanas or anything like that, but I guess being a club that I originally got the sack from back in '93, I guess, there's always a point to prove to Braggy.
The Falcons have lost 2 from 3 so far. Coach Dennis is confident of squaring the ledger.
We're ready, and we're really looking forward to this weekend, and we don't want to come away anything better than with a win.
Blake Doyle, NBN News.
"18-year-old Carl Armstrong and 19-year-old Scott Hall were convicted of assault and break and enter charges in Newcastle's District Court 4 weeks ago. Last November, the pair terrorised 80-year-old Bill O'Neill when they broke into his Wallsend home and bashed and robbed him. Today, they came before the courts to be considered for home detention. But holding a record, it was not to be for Armstrong, who was sentenced to 6 months jail. His accomplice, Scott Hall, was more fortunate, however, and has been allowed to serve his 6 months at home. Disgusted with the sentencing, Mr O'Neill says the pair got off far too lightly.
It's a disgrace, eh? You turn around, they come in, rob your home, break into your home, try to kill you, rob you, leave, and they get 6 months, eh? It's a bloody disgrace.
One of his attackers, Scott Hall, lived next door to Mr O'Neill, but has been ordered to serve his sentence at his mother's home in Karua. Mr O'Neill says the courts have rewarded rather than punished his attackers.
I said, when they don't walk them down the street, give them a ticker tape for reception, take them into the town hall there and let the Lord Mayor give them their home invasion certificate.
Simone Cobb, NBN News.
This is how Newcastle greeted the last right-wing Queensland politician who promised the nation quick solutions to some difficult problems. The wheels fell off Bjelke Petersen's 1987 Joe for PM campaign, but not before it destroyed the electoral chances of then opposition leader John Howard.
I suppose to some extent Joe Bjelke Petersen Queensland had a considerable amount more credibility than Pauline Hanson has.
Joe, you either loved him or you hated him. I think Pauline, it goes beyond the personal.
Ms Hanson's One Nation party threatens to steal votes from the coalition again, but it's a trade union movement that's taken up the fight.
Once the announcement was made that Pauline Hanson was coming to town, there's a considerable degree of concern amongst our affiliates.
Pauline Hanson is promoting Australian industry and I think it's absurd and they've lost the plot.
Newcastle's Trades Hall Council called an emergency meeting today to work towards a response to the MP's visit. The most probable option, a peaceful protest outside her May 30 speech. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
When 18-year-old Scott Hall walked out of Newcastle District Court yesterday into 6 months of home detention, community confidence in the scheme took a serious dip.
I think that the victim in this case is the real person who's been offended. I mean, he is going to suffer as a result of this. What's happened to the person who committed the crime? Slap on the wrist, go home, be a good boy for 6 months. It's not the message that the community wants, and it's not the message the government should be sending out.
It's a disgrace, eh? You turn around, they come in, rob your home, break into your home, try to kill you, rob you, leave, and they get 6 months, eh? It's a bloody disgrace.
On the night of November 13th last year, Hall and 19-year-old Carl Armstrong broke into the war veteran's home, assaulted and robbed him. Armstrong got 6 months jail. The sentences test the credibility of the government's tough stand 2 years ago on home invasions.
The community has had enough. We're drawing the line. If you cross it, you will go to jail for a very long time.
The opposition is calling for penalties which fit the crime.
The legislation disallows certain offences, but people who kidnap others, people who extort money from individuals or organisations, even an individual who walks into a bank or a shop with a note demanding money over the counter, that person could well qualify for home detention under this legislation.
I think that the Minister for Corrective Services and the Attorney-General should get together very quickly and put an amendment into the Parliament to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
Edgeworth was favoured to win last night's match, but the Eagles were asleep early on, Scott McLeroy's header finding Daniel McBreen. The Stag surprise goal and the bizarre ritual that followed sent alarm bells ringing through the home side. They spent the rest of the half camped in opposition territory. The weight of possession had to take its toll, and a couple of minutes later Edgeworth teamed up with Toronto's defenders to net the equaliser. It was the start of an Edgeworth onslaught. The Eagles scored another 4 goals for a convincing victory and a spot on the top of the table. Good conditions for second round action, but in the 9-foot division, favourites Mark Hancock and Dave Simons were both eliminated. Some over 35s were also caught off guard by the odd 1.5 metre set. Disappointment also for Newcastle longboarder Mick Lynch. After a convincing win in his opening heat, Lynch again strolled the nose but failed to walk into the semis. His heat was won by the South Coast Russell Watts, with Sydney's Richard Collins runner-up. Semis start proceedings tomorrow morning, with finals in all 8 divisions in the afternoon. The Bears had control from the outset at Western Park, running with a generous breeze at their backs. The locals blew none of their opening opportunities, and after 25 minutes it was already 4-0. After the incredible start, Belmont Swansea needed something special. It almost came soon after, but Western's defence swarmed to spoil the brief comeback. Then the defending premiers found room again, and Anthony Richards netted another for a 5-0 lead. The result was already beyond doubt, but Western hadn't finished its rout. That near miss followed by Richards' 4th of the day. Despite being comprehensively beaten before the break, there were some encouraging pieces of play for Belmont Swansea, but take nothing away from the Bears. The 10-goal win keeps their undefeated record intact, while Anthony Richards' 5-goal haul makes him the season's leading goal scorer. And better conditions indoors at Port Macquarie today for a Northern Junior Basketball League game between the locals under-18s and Cessnock. Port Macquarie was never in danger of defeat on its home court, winning 95-58. Doherty was placed on report for this tackle in the first half. Super League cleared the second rower late this afternoon, but he and his teammates still have plenty to think about.
Not happy losing every week. There's 2 losses in a row now, and they've been pretty big losses.
The day after and a pool session at the Junction was a big splash, missing out on the training injured winger Keith Beecham. He corked a thigh in the loss to Canterbury, and with the Mariners' next match on Friday, he's far from a certain starter.
No, it doesn't give us much time to get over our niggly injuries. There's a few niggly injuries at the moment, and I think mine's about the worst of all of them.
Murray searched for answers in the wake of last night's game. Hunter made too many mistakes, both in attack as well as defence. The high ball in particular caused problems.
I don't blame those guys. I'm more critical, and I'll be critical today of the people who just stop and just watch.
Craig Wise is the main casualty from the Bulldogs mauling. He's out of Friday night's first grade lineup. Brad Godden starts at centre, while Paul Marquette has been named in the back row. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
Established in 1896, Tattersalls Club is among the oldest in the region. However, its heyday has long since passed. The club never really recovered in the aftermath of the 1989 earthquake, and a dramatic drop in trade since the beginning of the year has left it in dire straits.
I think it's just Newcastle, period,
It used to be pretty popular about 3 or 4 years ago. It used to get a lot of the uni crowd. Now most of them go to the Lucky, and this place is pretty empty.
Members will meet early next month for a full report on the club's financial situation. One option may be to move.
We're looking for some other place to go, to shift to, or something like that, but it's up to the members themselves on the 4th.
Depressed property prices at the top end of town could put a move beyond the reach of the club. Meanwhile, administrators appointed to the Cardiff Workers Club have called a meeting of creditors for next Wednesday. Unsecured creditors are owed almost $600,000 on top of the $8.5 million owed to the Commonwealth Bank. Despite the financial worries, the administrators are assuring members the club will definitely not close and it's business as usual. Phil Hind, NBN News.
The heads were down as Dennis delivered another pep talk this afternoon. The Falcons have had 4 losses on the trot. The weekend's matches perhaps their worst.
For us to play the way we did, that it's just not on, and we've got to find a way, and we will find a way to make sure that doesn't happen anymore.
The side's training has again been hampered this week. The 4 rep players will return by Thursday. Dennis will wait until then to get tough. He'll discuss the team's professionalism and that 4-minute period on Saturday when Newcastle failed to get in a shot.
There's times on Saturday where you could have thrown a blanket over 4 or 5 guys. They're so close to each other. I mean, and an under-12 team could guard us when we play offence like that.
Newcastle plays Adelaide this weekend. Butch Hayes draws an interesting parallel to the team that's won its last 4 from 4.
They started off the year slowly and they've picked up their game, and that's just what we've got to do.
A better weekend for Nobbies at the New South Wales IRB Championships at Gerringong on the south coast. The club won 8 of the 16 finals at Werry Beach to crush the opposition in the overall point score. Nobbies became only the 2nd club in history to win 3 consecutive titles. They're now the team to beat at the Australian Championships in WA next month. And Newcastle Breakers captain Troy Halpin has moved 1 step closer to a berth in the Socceroos after being named in the approaching Superstars of Soccer series. It kicks off in Melbourne on Wednesday, Halpin joining Australia's top local and international-based players in the 3 games. The series is seen as a trial for selection in the World Cup.
Cotton chemical spraying in Gunnedah has been the focus of bitter debate, with the issue continuing to simmer. John Anderson has stepped into the spotlight to have his say on the matter, admitting he is deeply concerned substantiated allegations may compromise confidence in agriculture around Gunnedah.
There are local concerns, and I want to say firstly that people need to recognise that we don't authorise the use of chemicals without them having been thoroughly evaluated by the Department of Health, by Environment Australia and by WorkSafe Australia.
The Primary Industries Minister has backed a call from member for Barwon, Ian Slacksmith, for a complete study into the health effects of cotton pesticide spraying. He claims such a review would help restore confidence in farming as well as protect thousands of jobs.
And when it comes to the registration of chemicals and their clearance for uses in agriculture, we have to ensure that we're responding to sound science. Now, there are allegations floating around at the moment about health problems that are related to the use of agricultural chemicals. And we need to establish, really, whether there is any veracity to those claims.
Mr Anderson says he is furious that the ill-informed debate may be placing at risk the livelihoods of many rural families.
So I urge people to approach this matter in a sensible and level-headed way, and to try and put aside some of the emotion that is built up in some quarters, not many, but in some.
From the 5th of July, under-18 boys, girls and intellectually disabled rep teams from across the country will pound the boards at the Broadmeadow Stadium.
This year we're doing something that hasn't happened in the last 2 years, and that is we're going to play all the games under the one roof. And 38 teams, 120 games over the week. It's quite a large organisation.
For competitors, there's more at stake than the glory of an Australian title. Selectors will be keeping a close watch to pick players for the Australian Junior Camp at the AIS in January next year, a stepping stone to national representative duties.
This age group will form the basis for the next Junior Men's World Championship, which will be held in 1999.
It's also a chance for NBL clubs to scout the stars of tomorrow and for current players to check out the competition.
I'm going to go have a look and see what the young talent's like. I'm sure there'll be a lot of coaches up here as well having a look. Some of the guys in the league now are getting a bit older and they've got to look for young kids coming in.
The championships will run for a week. Phil Hind, NBN News.
3 years in the planning and still no closer to construction. Cessnock Council called an extraordinary meeting late yesterday to debate Western Aluminium's building application. The plant's backers had hoped councillors would approve the application. Instead, the public will be asked to scrutinise the plans. Western Aluminium's managing director left the meeting stunned.
People who need to know about this project know about it because it's had extensive publicity.
Council has actually delayed this, I think it's 14 days, by advertising it. We'll clarify it. It may well be that that is a big advantage to the applicant in the long term.
The application will go before council in a fortnight. Meanwhile, a meeting of around 100 people was told of a plan to truck in 400,000 tonnes of domestic garbage a year from Sydney into Cessnock. Waste Service New South Wales is looking at setting up a waste management centre in disused quarries on Old Maitland Road. Under the proposal, council will receive around $2 per tonne of waste.
There's a very real benefit to the community for this kind of proposal, and of course there are also very real financial benefits for the community as well.
Local Greens, though, are wary of the project.
We all have a problem with waste, and the answer to that is to reduce it, to reuse it and to recycle it. The answer is not simply to shift it from one area to another.
Blake Doyle, NBN News.
"56-year-old Graham Wiley and his 42-year-old wife Jeanette Wiley, both of Glen Innes, were killed instantly when their red Mazda sedan collided head-on with a blue Ford Falcon. Police say the couple were heading to Tamworth to shop for the day. 21-year-old Anthony Magri of Prairiewood in Sydney, driver of the second car, also died. His passenger, a 21-year-old woman, survived the accident and was rushed to hospital in a serious condition. Later that night, she gave birth to a baby girl by caesarean section. Another passenger in the Ford Falcon, a 40-year-old man, also from Sydney, was airlifted to Lismore Base Hospital, where he's in a stable condition. It's believed the three were driving to Brisbane. Police believe the accident was fatigue-related and say the road was slippery, but have referred investigations on to the coroner. Nicole Webb, NBN News.